So the exhibition is at Timespan. The exhibition's called Red Herring. It's a body of work that looks at the history of the herring girls through gendered labour and kind of community archival sources. So I've worked with the local community in Helmsdale, looking at their kind of history and memories of the herring girls, but also kind of contemporary issues around women's issues. And so the exhibition's on from March the 29th, 2025 until September the 29th, 2025. So it's been a really interesting process. I think when you work somewhere that's not your home, there's always issues that you have to be aware of before you even arrive there. So like for me, I have to think, like I was invited here to do an artist in residence program, which is basically when you, as a photographer or an artist, come somewhere and make work about usually a set theme. Now, I'm always very aware of being the outsider in the community. And I think to be aware of those issues and to, at the very start, hold like thinkings with the community. So one of the ideas I had was, like, I'll work with the women now in Helmsdale, but actually, there's no childcare after school, there's no healthcare provisions. So like a lot of the women don't have time to come and do like arts or photography workshops or think about these things because they have children. So how would they attend them? And so kind of moulding the residency to fit with what people told me there was their need and what they could and couldn't do. So instead of working with the women, I worked with Helmsdale Primary School, which has actually been richer. And so I think coming into something with flexibility, but also coming in somewhere explaining that you're going to be leaving is really important because you're not going to be here forever. And I think approaching that really ethically and considered is really important. One of the key researchers I looked at for this exhibition was Jill de Fresnes. And in her research, she talks about this account where there were Scots herring girls in Scarborough. And basically there was these women who weren't in the fishing industry. And one of the fisher girls was off work and she was wearing this red dress and she was, like in her best clothes and was walking beside them. And they were basically talking about the herring girls as like creatures that are non-human. So they were saying these creatures that aren't even human because they saw them as kind of, there was multiple stereotypes. So a lot of the women would have been from the west coast of Scotland, so they've only spoken Gaelic. And I think the thing is, as well, they would have been coming to England along this coast, so they won't have necessarily spoken the language. Some of them might have done, they would have learned quite quickly. The work was seen as kind of dirty or unclean or quite often. So from the fishing communities, it was respected work. But outside of the fishing communities, the fisher folk were seen as other. So they had those barriers, but they also had this kind of that idea that, like the Victorian idea, the cult of domesticity, or like now we have like the trad wife movement. And so those women working would have gone against that. And so again, would have been seen as like immoral. And quite often I think it's quite interesting when you look at herring girls, because either you get this like romantic herring girls working hard, laughing, or you get the other version, which is it was really hard and it was kind of like completely extractive, exploitative labour, and they weren't free. And I think actually in the UK, it's about the duality. So they did have freedom from their rural communities. They did get to travel at like 15 across the UK in groups. They did get to kind of like learn something new, travel with a group of women. They participated in strikes, but the work was very low paid. It was very like dangerous in terms of they used the kloots to bandage their hands. A lot of them had cut scars that were left until old age. It was hard, long hours, cold. The conditions that they stayed in were not great. Often there wouldn't be a toilet, and as the kind of years went by, this got better. But for me, it's kind of both of those things. It's not one of them entirely. I think one of the things that was happening when I was making this work, and the work is also like a series of performative portraits that are from the community memories. But what really struck me whilst making the work was that kind of the talk of like a decrease in women's rights across the world. So like across the globe, Women are kind of facing like harder issues. I know we've just had abortion decriminalised in the UK, but if you look to the US, kind of things around women are getting worse. And so there's this kind of like conservatism that's happening. We feel more free than ever, but actually it doesn't necessarily translate in reality. And so I think whilst making that work, this was on my mind, and there's one of the books that was key to it, which is called Caliban and the Witch. And it talks about women and how like domestic labour is not kind of understood, and this kind of like reproduction value. And so bringing that into the performative work was really important. And I think kind of this kind of the thoughts that go alongside it for me were really important. Even though this is about herring girls, I think you can reactivate what people think about now by looking at the past.